Samsung TVs have been one of the more popular brands in the last couple of years, and whether you're new to TV buying or maybe you've bought a TV in the past, I hope this guide will be very helpful to you to find the best TV for you within Samsung's lineup. With this buying guide, I really hope to take the guesswork out of buying a Samsung TV if that's the route you've chosen to go. There is a ton of different TVs out there, and TV buying can be very confusing. Alright, we're going to start here with the Crystal UHD lineup, and I really just want to burn through these first couple of pages because I do think these are very similar to other entry-level TVs, and that will even go for QLED when we talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, Crystal UHD TVs, they're just basic LCD TVs, and you're going to find very similar results from any type of TV that's going to be within this price bracket, whether it's going to be an edge-lit TV or a direct-lit TV. They're all going to look very similar in this price bracket. And I'm not just saying that to say it. I have seen these TVs side by side so many times on so many different occasions. They don't change very much from year to year. And this price bracket is pretty much set in stone. It's always going to be the same type of thing. And as you get up in price in this price bracket, then you see that TCL and Hisense start to make more sense. So even when we go up here to the QLED TVs, this is adding quantum dot now, but is a very similar backlight technology to what we were just saying in the Crystal UHD series. So the Q6F, the Q7F, and the Q8F, well, the key difference there is going to be that there's a processor difference once you jump from the Q6F to the Q7F. And then when you jump from the Q7F to the Q8F, you get a refresh rate difference going up to 120 hertz. So yeah, the difference between, say, a Crystal UHD TV and a Q7F is not going to be very large. There's going to be a color difference. There's a little bit more brightness difference, but it's not really going to be huge in terms of contrast performance. It's going to be very similar to the Crystal UHD series. So you are just getting a little bit of benefits going to a QLED TV. Processing is also going to be better too. So you'll notice things like upscaling getting a little bit better, streaming seems a little bit better, and then you'll also see things like maybe artifacts aren't going to be as common, motion artifacts, things like that. So little upgrades here and there that you may or may not notice, and that's the thing that when you are shopping in this value budget range, then sometimes it just makes more sense to look at the biggest TV you can get for the price, and don't worry too much about the brand or the actual model. Just see what has the features you need. First of all, make sure it has all the HDMI ports you need, and then make sure it's the right size for you. If that's where you're shopping in that budget, that's what I suggest. Now, going up to the frame, this is still within the QLED lineup, and you're overpaying for these TVs. I just have to say that straightforward. Unless you're looking for that art look, the frame is not going to be a series you want to look into. It's just really for the looks, and it does a good job of presenting those looks, and it's a decent TV. So the difference is not much. Honestly, the frame to the frame pro is more brightness, but the contrast difference isn't large. The only biggest difference is going to be that brightness difference, the refresh rate, some processing differences, and then the wired versus wireless One Connect box. But again, the frame in the Frame Pro, you are definitely overpaying for that look. It does get a little bit more complicated as we go up in the lineup, but I don't want to make it too complicated, so I'm going to be really straightforward with my answers and kind of cut through some of the BS that is here with the lineup, because trust me, there's a lot that you really need to just understand about it. And I just want to ask that if you find this guide helpful, please consider buying from one of my affiliate links in the description below when you are going to buy your next TV or really any product at all. Thank you guys so much for your support, and now let's continue on with the rest of the video. So here we are in the Neo QLED lineup, and Neo QLED basically stands for Mini LED TV in Samsung's lineup. So anytime you see Neo QLED, you know it has some sort of mini LED. And with the QN70F in mind, this is edge-lit mini LED TV. So don't get it confused with the next two, the QN80F and the QN90F, which have full array mini LED. You don't really want to get that confused because it is going to be quite a contrast difference. The QN70F is going to be very similar to the Frame Pro. So if you're looking at the Frame Pro, you could actually get the QN70F a lot cheaper and get almost exactly the same picture quality. So you're just not going to get that art look. Remember what I said about the frame, you're overpaying for that look. And the QN70F is going to be at kind of a value price, and it's not quite to the same degree as the QN80F and the QN90F, which are going to be more at that mid-range premium price. And in my opinion, the QN80F and the QN90F are a lot better than the QN70F. Now, the QN70F doesn't have the glare-free coating, and neither does the QN80F. That's only going to be found on the QN90F. So if you are looking for that sort of thing in your LCD TV, then you have to get the QN90F. But the biggest elephant in the room with the QN80F and the QN90F is the fact that you can get better TVs for the price from Samsung with the OLED lineup, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But those may only make sense if you are in the smaller sizes, because as you go up in size with OLED, it does get a little bit pricier. But there's going to be some examples of the larger sized OLEDs being very similar price to this, and so maybe that'll make more sense. But I do want to say the difference between the QN80F and the QN90F is going to be a little bit of a processing difference, and then also going up from 144 hertz to 165 hertz. So if you are looking for that difference, then maybe that will matter for you. On top of that, it's going to have slightly better contrast with a little bit better backlight performance with more dimming zones, and it's going to be brighter overall. So there is a difference between the QN80F and the QN90F, but if they're side by side, I don't think you're going to notice a huge difference between them, as they are both going to be full array local dimming mini LED TVs. Now, one thing for sure, the Neo QLEDs can get pretty bright overall. So if you're in a bright room, these TVs can make a lot of sense. But if you're in a darker room, then the entry-level OLEDs we're about to talk about are definitely gonna be the buys over Neo QLED for sure, unless you just demand this high peak brightness. But if you do have high peak brightness in mind, we'll have some other TVs for that a little bit later that are going to be just a little bit more than the QN90F. But not too much more, I promise you that. Let's go to the entry level OLEDs here as we look at some of the more impressive TVs in the lineup. So starting off with the entry level S84F and S85F, you're probably thinking, what is the big difference between these two TVs? Well, the answer is, if they're the same technology inside the panel, then it's going to be absolutely really nothing. It's just going to be some minor differences across the board, nothing too serious. But when it comes down to the US, the 55-inch and 65-inch S85F is going to have quantum dot OLED instead of WOLED, which is going to be found in all the other sizes in the S85F. With the S84F in mind, the 65-inch, and that is WOLED all the time. So that's one thing that is going to be a difference between the S84F and the S85F. But if we're talking 77-inch and 83-inch, well, the S84F and the S85F, it's almost the same exact TV in that regard, as they are both going to be WOLEDs. So in those sizes, if the S84F is cheaper than the S85F, absolutely get the S84F and save some money. In my opinion, I still buy these TVs over Neo QLED in most cases, unless you are in a bright room. These TVs won't get as bright as the higher end Neo QLEDs that we looked at just a second ago, but they will still get the job done. And if you are in a dark room, you really won't need the extra brightness. And if you're in a medium lit room, these TVs will be just fine as well. I do think the contrast performance of the OLED TVs just greatly outshine the Neo QLED TVs. So that is why I like even the entry-level TVs over the Neo QLED TVs. Getting into the QD-OLED category, this is where we're going to find Samsung's best TVs that they offer. These are going to be very similar to the TVs we just talked about, but except for a lot brighter. As great of TVs as these TVs are, I will have to say that unless you're needing the cutting edge, if you're looking for the extra brightness, I would definitely still look at that entry level OLED if that's kind of your budget range. I wouldn't really crack into these unless you absolutely are more of an enthusiast and you're looking for more brightness and maybe you're a gamer. Then these TVs make more sense. A lot of content out there is going to really not push your TV to the maximum limit like the S90F and the S95F will really be able to get to. So like the S85F and the S84F, for most people will probably be enough. Like you could probably just stop there. but this is cutting edge. So when you get to the S90F, you have gotten to a pinnacle of TVs that is just really great. And then if you want to go further than that, you really just have to be an extremely picky person to want something better than the S90F. But if you are that person, you'll have to understand that there is differences with the S95F in mind. And sometimes maybe you're after that glare-free coating and you have to pay up for the S95F. And we'll talk about that in a second. So these are going to be some of the brightest OLED TVs in their price bracket on the market. There's no doubt about that. And when it comes down to the S90F, it is going to be one of the best TVs in its price bracket. It does have some of the best value that you can get in that price bracket with the 55-inch price and the 65-inch price and the 77-inch price. It's just ridiculously good. You're getting QD-OLED all the time in the US in those sizes. Now, if you are in a different location other than the US, definitely look into this because you could get a WOLED. I made a video all about this. If you need to know more information, it is linked in the description. If you're not in the US, I highly suggest you look at that video if you're interested in the S90F before you buy it. And the S90F, that's where the glossy OLED screen ends as we get to the S95F, which features a glare-free coating. So the glossy finish turns into a matte-like finish with the S95F in mind. And all of these are going to be QD-OLED except for the 83-inch size, which is going to be the same technology found in the LG G5 for that 83-inch size. With the S95F, you're going to be getting a brighter picture out of the S95F compared to the S90F because it uses the latest QD-OLED technology. So you may be thinking, man, where do I go with all this information? Where do I go? What OLED do I buy? What LCD do I buy? Do I buy an LCD or an OLED? And I think that really just depends on the size you need, the budget range you're in, so many different factors that may be just kind of unique to you, which if you have any questions at all, please leave a comment and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can if I do see them. If I don't see them, I do apologize. I'll try to look as often as I can to make sure you get your question answered for sure. You could leave a super thanks if that's something you want to get your answer right away, but I'll try to get to that question regardless if you leave a super thanks. It's just an option to get it pushed up if you really need that answer urgently. And if you need even more help, I have a ton of different buying guides and I have a ton of different comparisons with different TVs that you can take a look at as well as reviews. So definitely check those out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and I hope to see you in the next one.